Hello, I'm Kristy Allen, and you're listening to the Tsunami of Truth podcast here on jmcbroadcasting.com for February 12th, 2026. Listen up, truth seekers. We are starting this journey with a quote from a man who knew the score long before the rest of us. Mayor Amschel Rothschild famously said, "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." If that doesn't send a chill down your spine, you may still be plugged into the matrix. To understand 2026, we have to look at the Kazarian Mafia, or the KM. For those still listening to the news, here is the reality check. The KM was not just a group of ordinary people. They were a parasitic state from the 8th century that mastered identity theft. You heard me right. They adopted a mask of religion to hide a belief system that traces all the way back to ancient Babylon. You've probably heard by now about what they've been doing to children for a very long time now, and the question is, why do they do this? Well, it's a blood trade. They view humanity as livestock. They believe that the trauma harvested from the innocent provides them with temporal power. I'm sorry, but this is the unbelievably human stupidity we've lived under, allowing a group that has been expelled from over 100 countries to run our banks and our lives and our children's lives. They weren't kicked out for their faith. They were kicked out for their rituals. From Russia in 965 AD to the purges in Western Europe, the pattern is the same. Once the people realized their children were being used for sacrifice, the KM was purged. Historically, these expulsions were triggered by the discovery of ritualistic practices and the monopolization of local currencies through usury. Now, these go hand in hand, believe it or not, because we're dealing with the same groups of people doing both in the areas that they were kicked out of. But like a virus, they moved, they changed names, and eventually hijacked the Federal Reserve. And after what they've gotten away with, if you're still believing they have your best interests at heart, you should feel embarrassed. There's a reason Trump went to the Supreme Court over the Fed, and the result was a new Fed appointee. First, Kevin Warsh, but he was a washout. Sorry, couldn't help myself. And instead, he might choose Judy Shelton. She's a gold bug, and Trump has liked her philosophy in the past, so we'll see how that goes. Personally, I do not know why we are one bit concerned about hanging on to the Fed at all, but I guess this is part of the transition. So this will be interesting to watch. Now let's bring in a name many of you might remember, Karen Hudes. Karen was a senior counsel at the World Bank for over 20 years. She didn't just see the paperwork. She saw the plumbing of the gold theft. Karen famously blew the whistle on the fact that the world's gold wasn't where they said it was. She revealed that the global financial system was being run by a monolithic cabal. Same word that JFK used. Notice that. And she also said that this monolithic cabal used the World Bank and the IMF to enslave nations through unpayable debt. Karen spoke about the global debt jubilee long before it was a headline, and she warned us that the gold of the world, the real wealth of humanity, had been moved into shadow accounts. Her testimony and her work with all 50 state governors was the early groundwork for the miracle we are seeing today. She showed us that the monsters weren't just in the basement, they were in the boardrooms. You see, fiat money isn't just paper. It's a parasite rotting the republic from the inside out. And as of early 2026, we are sitting on $38 trillion in national debt. Do you even know how much that is? It's $1 million added every 6 seconds. There are no brakes on this bus, and the driver is a globalist ghost. This isn't an oopsie. It's a design. A system that prints money out of thin air is a system designed to keep you and I in a permanent state of drag. It's invisible taxation. It's the mark of Cain for your wallet. And when the dollar devalues, they are literally stealing the skin of your labor. Back in 1913, these Kazarian descendant bankers managed to hijack the U.S. Constitution. They formed their privately owned U.S. Inc. and the Federal Reserve. They funneled your hard-earned money to the U.K. Crown in London and the Vatican Bank, and then they just charged the U.S. government interest to use its own money. And if that isn't the definition of a scam, I don't know what is. Now, here's the part where the bunk believers really start to lose their minds. Let's talk about how we got here. In 2011, a group of high-ranking military generals, we're going to call them the White Hats, realized that the republic was on the verge of total collapse. They saw that the Kazarian Mafia had successfully captured the presidency, the courts, and the currency. Now, let me repeat that. They found out that the KMs captured the presidency, captured the courts, and captured the currency. Why did they choose Donald Trump? Because they needed a Trojan horse who couldn't be bought and didn't have the typical political strings attached. Because let's face it, most of the billionaires of this world were completely compromised. I heard that their other choice was Lou Dobbs, also a very good man, but he said no. So they asked Donald Trump. These white hat generals, including names like Mike Flynn and others who understood the intelligence landscape, approached Trump. They didn't just ask him to run, they presented him with a plan that had been well thought out and gamed using game theory, one that was, well, pretty much bulletproof because they had acquired some, let's call them special win strategy tools and assistance that made it a very, very good plan. They chose Donald Trump because he had already proven himself as an independent informant for the FBI during the 2006 Epstein investigation. He knew how those mobster monsters, dragons in the cave, worked from the inside. They just needed a businessman who understood the art of the deal to dismantle this criminal structure. About 155-year-old criminal structure. So Trump wasn't just a candidate. He was a military-backed asset activated to perform a surgical strike on the deep state. And if you think he did this for fame, you may be missing the entire thing. He literally sacrificed his billionaire lifestyle and risked his entire life to enter a snake pit for us. Now, this leads to the lore that a lot of people don't even know about, but Karen Hudes knew, and she told us about the Saint Germain World Trust. Historically, Count Saint Germain was more than just a socialite. He was the architect of a fund intended to bankroll the transition from where we are now so we could automatically bankroll our brand new golden age. The fund was intended to bankroll the transition, and then the hijack happened when the Kazarian banking cabal used that goal to collateralize the very first debt-based central banks. They essentially used our own liberation fund as the seed money for our enslavement. But true to form, those wascally wabbits, yeah, they hijacked it. And you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, of course they did. They used the gold meant for our liberation to collateralize their debt-based fiat system. They used our own inheritance to build their big plantation and make us their slaves. And I don't know about you, but that just kind of burns my cookies. But by the late 90s, the White Hats began the counter heist. This kind of a movie. I love this part. And this is where NESARA comes in. It was designed to return those hijacked funds that the deep state fought back on September 11, 2001. Did you ever wonder why the computers in the World Trade Center processing the NESARA transfers were destroyed? It wasn't a coincidence. It was war against the miracle that the White Hats had planned. Now remember that this isn't just a movie. It's a literal war. And just like 9/11 and COVID, the people die in wars. But the patriots, not just in our country, but in a lot of countries, fought back. So let's talk leverage. How did 209 nations all sign on to the gold-backed system? Were they all in bed with the Rothschilds? Yes, they were. But here's the thing. Parasites eventually kill the host. And by 2025, the fiat system was so cannibalistic that even the puppet leaders realized they were on a sinking ship. So by 2026, it wasn't just BRICS. It was the entire world screaming for relief from what everyone saw coming. So this was just some of the leverage that the White Hats used, and it was twofold. First, the collapse of the US dollar fiat left them with no choice. And second, the quantum financial system provided a way to bypass the Rothschild-controlled SWIFT system. The leverage wasn't a friendly handshake. It was a military-grade ultimatum. The alliance showed these leaders the evidence of their crimes, the usual trafficking, laundering, the monsters in the basements. And they were given a choice. join the new gold-backed republics worldwide, or face military tribunals. Remember Trump's capitulation tour? So this is where BRICS comes in. It wasn't just an economic club, it was the exit ramp. You join the QFS, you peg your currency to your own natural resources, and you walk away from the Kazarian debt trap. And because that was their one and only chance to walk away from the Kazarian debt trap, basically it was all over by then. And the White Hats were in control. So if you don't know that yet, have that for an aha moment. If they blew it once, even once, they were replaced. And based on the number of lookalikes and masks and 2.0s, I have no trouble believing that some reneged on their one and only second chance. So let's get into the deep timeline. This isn't just about 2016 or 2024. Like I said before, this is a 155-year plan that dates back to the post-Civil War era. After the Kazarian bankers effectively hijacked the U.S. Treasury with the Act of 1871, converting our republic into a corporation, the military intelligence community began a long game strategy. For over a century now, the White Hats have been mapping the lineages and the financial trails of these central bankers. They watched as the Fed was created in 1913. They watched as JFK was removed for trying to introduce silver certificates with Executive Order 11110, and the military realized that they couldn't just have a coup that would destroy this nation. They had to wait for the system to reach its mathematical end. Well, that end arrived in the year 2010. The $38 trillion debt we see on the clock in 2026, that was the trigger. The White Hats knew the fiat system would collapse under its own weight. They needed a leader who could manage the controlled demolition of the old system while the QFS was being built in the background by Space Force and the Allied Special Forces. Trump was the face of that demolition. He wasn't a politician, he was a businessman, and his job was to see this through to the bankruptcy of U.S. Inc. and into the golden age he and the White Hats have worked so hard for. And remember that speech in New Hampshire in 2024 when he said, quote, "I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. It would be a dangerous threat to freedom," unquote. And you all remember that quote. So let's address the man leading the charge again. If you're still listening to the mainstream media tell you Donald Trump was friends with Epstein, remember that the media spent years trying to tie Trump to Epstein. But as of February 26, the FBI FD 302 files have nuked that narrative. The evidence suggests Trump was operating as a high-level, independent informant, as I had mentioned early on several months ago. And if you're still listening to the mainstream media tell you Donald Trump was friends with Epstein, you're wearing clown shoes. Trump was an independent informant, and Chief Michael Reiter confirmed that the same thing in an FBI interview that Trump called him in July of 2006 and said, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this," unquote. He revealed that he had been around Epstein once when teenagers were present, and to quote the official record, he got the hell out of there to report it, unquote. Trump identified Ghislaine Maxwell as the evil operative and told the investigators to focus on her. He kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago for recruiting a young woman. He didn't look the other way. He threw that monster out. And now Maxwell is sitting in a cell begging for clemency and has admitted that Trump is innocent of any wrongdoing, unquote. She knows he was the one who blew the whistle. So if you're still believing the bunk that he's the bad guy, you're the one being played. Trump just did to 66 organizations what nobody thought possible. He signed Executive Order 14199, where he closed and defunded 66 international organizations. As it turns out, all of these defunded organizations have all undermined the U.S. and have actively worked against U.S. interests, including 31 connected to the United Nations. Look, it's time to stop the embarrassing worship of the lies and look at the evidence. Trump didn't just run for president. He was activated by the military who knew he already had the intel from years undercover. He used his status to map the network. He and Melania stood as a shield. They never took the bait. They never got any dirt on them, and that's why the deep state has spent 10 years trying to frame him. The globalists have a plan B. The central bank digital currency. Now, if you'll remember, Trump drew a red line in the sand on January 23rd, 2025, with an executive order called Strengthening American Leadership in Digital Financial Technology. With this EO, he explicitly banned the establishment or issuance of a U.S. CBDC. Why? Because a CBDC is a digital leash. If you have cash, you're sovereign. If you have a programmable token, you're a prisoner. They could freeze your account for misinformation. They could tax you automatically. But Trump is leading a counter-offensive against the ultimate deep weapon of the deep state, that CBDC currency. So remember that there are two digital currencies here. One is a non-asset-based or fiat currency, and one that is backed by gold and silver. One that does not even compare to fiat. So let's get into this for a second. I researched this, and on the surface, digital is digital, right? If it's on a screen, someone can theoretically track it. But here's the distinction in the 2026 landscape, and it comes down to permission versus protection. Fiat CBDC is backed by nothing but a government's promise, because the value is created out of thin air. The issuer is the central bank, and they feel that they have the right to dictate how it is used. They created the math, so they own the rules. But asset-backed QFS, gold standard digital currency, is a digital certificate of a physical reality. If you have one token backed by 1 gram of gold, that token is simply a digital receipt for a physical thing that exists in a vault. The value comes from the earth, not the government. The difference between a CBDC and an asset-backed digital currency is the difference between a prison ledger and a title deed. One tracks you to see if you're behaving, while the other tracks the asset to ensure the money is honest. One is a tool for enslavement, the fiat, and the other is a tool for efficiency and sovereignty. So the CBDC, everything flows through one central server, and that's the danger. One off switch. See that? But the asset-backed digital QFS operates on a distributed ledger like the quantum financial system. There's no middleman, that bank that can freeze your transaction because they don't like your politics. The quantum aspect means the ledger is monitored for fraud and not behavior. A CBDC is programmable money. This means the government can put an expiration date on your paycheck, spend it by Friday or it vanishes, or geofence it, like you can't buy gas more than 5 miles from home. They can literally code no into your wallet based on your social credit score. The asset-backed mirror in the system the white hats are pushing, the digital ledger is used for speed and transparency, not control, because the currency is pegged to a hard asset, and the programming is restricted to the transfer of value. Think of it like a digital version of a gold coin. A gold coin doesn't care if you're buying a Bible or a burger. It just works. So consider that when you vote in 2026, because we aren't just voting for a leader. We're voting for the right to own our own lives. And if you think a digital dollar is for your convenience, you're falling for the most expensive lie in history. So brace yourselves, people. The next part is rough and raw. But there's a reason I'm bringing it up, so stay with me here. Operation Hellstorm 2 is the moment the media silence finally breaks. We're talking about special forces storming facilities where children were bred in captivity. We're talking about adrenochrome harvesting, emaciated children bred in captivity, hooked to blood drains like livestock. This is the devil's blood trade that fuels the global elite. The media is silent. Why? Because they are the PR firm for the monsters. Let that sink in. Those talking heads on the nightly news were paid to keep silent about this. You won't see this on CNN or BBC because the people buying the blood own the cameras. They've been using media silence as a shield for a ritual slaughterhouse funded by Western demand. Putin was right about this. If this doesn't make you want to scream for justice, nothing will. This is why the 11.4 signal exists. This is the cleanup the military is doing while the world thinks they're just stationed. Russian special forces didn't just liberate a base, they stormed a ritual slaughterhouse protected by media silence. How stupid have we been to believe the media all this time? They put kids on milk cartons while ignoring the factories under our feet. But the miracle is that the money is being cut off. You cannot run a global trafficking ring if the fiat cave is closed for business. But with Starlink and the QFS, their laundering ability is being cut off. So do the math here. By stopping the CBDC, Trump is starving the beast. He's starving them all, the monsters and the media. And lo and behold, the mathematical inevitability has arrived, and those monsters are now out of time. We've been mind controlled to believe predators were leaders and debt shackles were money. I mean, really, how stupid do they think we are? The Fed is not part of the government. It's a world bank that is owned by a few people. The U.S. government does not own or control it. Congress gave the Fed control of the U.S. monetary system in 1913 and passed the 16th Amendment, although some argue with that. We, the people, were and always have been the security. They can take your house, your car, and freedom, and if you don't pay, they'll send you to federal prison and take all your things. Ask Ken and Barbie Cromar. The government doesn't make you pay income tax. The World Bank or the Fed does. And if Trump gets rid of income tax, it will break the chains and make it possible to get rid of the IRS and the Fed. Look, they thought they could use our tax dollars to fund ritual slaughterhouses and then track our every move with a CBDC. Hell no. Trump spent 20 years preparing this counteroffensive. He's the Trojan horse that successfully entered the cave where these unevolved dragons live. And now those doors are swinging wide open for all to see. The old world is dying so the new golden age can be birthed. We are transmuting 155 years of lead into gold. And my friends, this is a true and bona fide miracle that has been accomplished. The Q movement became formalized after the 1963 assassination of JFK, who tried to return us to silver-backed currency. Fast forward to 2016, the White Hat generals put in Trump because he couldn't be blackmailed, and as of February 9th, 2026, sources confirmed the final phase is activated. Military White Hats and Space Force are in control of the communications grid. The legacy media towers are about to go silent and replaced with Starlink. Look up Law of War Manual 11.4. This is the end here. The emergency broadcast system is the solar flash of truth. The debt clock isn't a warning anymore, it's a countdown, and we are hitting the big red button reset to real money. We're talking gold-backed, silver-backed, asset-measured reality. The Rothschild Kazarian Mafia have been given their eviction notices. Nasara Jasara is live. Debt slavery is dead. The new digital gold-backed currency ISO 222 is live. This is the great reset to real money. 209 nations are currently transitioning to the gold standard. This is how America started, and it's the only way the dragon spirit life force, can be disciplined enough to earn its wings. And if you're still clinging to your paper dollars and your mainstream lies, you're going to be left in the dust of history. Speaking of history, Abraham Lincoln said, "I am a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis," unquote. So these are the facts, and to the mainstream or alternative media, I want to say this to you. Don't be embarrassed by the truth. Be empowered by it. And certainly, if you have doubted, I invite you to see this miracle unfolding right now, because it's right in front of your eyes. Thanks for listening to the Tsunami of Truth. I'm Kristy Allen, here on JohnMichaelChambers.com.
The Federal Reserve is no more a government agency than Federal Express. The Federal Reserve is a corporation founded and run by international bankers.
The Global Financial Reset is not just another podcast or episode of pertinent current discussions concerning economic-related issues. It's also an ongoing educational workshop series.
Join me and my prominent guests every Wednesday live at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on JMC Broadcasting's backup Rumble channel on X, Facebook, and YouTube. Sign up for JMC's free weekly war report, including notifications of when the Global Financial Reset show is published. The future is bright, and it belongs to us, not to the global elite.
You can survive and thrive this reset transition, but it takes action on your behalf. The Global Financial Reset Workshop Series gives you the tools to get out of the system with confidence.